Our top focus at this hour, amid heightened tensions, the presidents of the world's two largest economies, the United States and China, Joe Biden and Xi Jinping, are set to meet virtually. The highly anticipated summit is expected to be one of the most extensive meetings under the Biden administration. Washington is hopeful of setting the agenda. According to a senior U.S. official, Biden is going to make it clear to Xi that China must play by the rules, which is what responsible nations do. The official added that Biden will steer the talks in a way which will be favorable to the interests of Washington and its allies. The U.S. has said that the talks with China will be substantive and not symbolic. The issues that the U.S. is going to bring up in this meeting are Chinese aggression towards Taiwan, setting terms of competition to avoid further conflict, and China's quote-unquote economic coercion, China's alleged human rights abuses, The Chinese side, on the one hand, did not reveal much about its expectations from the talks. The country's foreign ministry said that Xi and Biden will hold a deep exchange of views on the strategic issues of their future relations.
According to what's been agreed upon by both sides, President Xi and President Biden will hold a frank, deep and full exchange of views on the strategic issue of the future of China-US relations, as well as other issues of mutual concern.
Washington and Beijing have been sparring on several issues, but tensions over Taiwan have taken center stage. The U.S. is a close ally of Taiwan, while China claims sovereignty on the self-ruled island. In the face of Chinese aggression, Washington has repeatedly signaled its support for Taiwan and has not ruled out using force to bring it under its control. Beijing, on the other hand, has been concerned by Washington's moves to deepen ties with Taiwan. Xi is expected to use this virtual meeting with Biden to warn America to step back on the Taiwan issue in particular. Both sides have indicated that they will not give ground on the flashpoint issues. For more on this highly anticipated meet, joining us now is James Schwemlein from Washington, D.C. James is a non-resident scholar in the South Asia program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Also joining us on this broadcast is our correspondent from New York, Susan Teherani. James, I'd like to take my first question from you. Welcome to Beyond World is One. The world will be watching as the two leaders come face-to-face virtually after a long period of strained ties between China and the United States. How do you see this meeting unfolding? Many say that China will prioritize the topic of Taiwan, which of course has the support of the U.S.
Sure, I suspect Taiwan will be at the top of both agendas, but I think this meeting is particularly important coming off of a difficult couple years in the relationship, a lot of bluster and wolf warrior diplomacy coming from both Washington and Beijing. This is both the effort on the part of President Biden and also the part of President Xi and his team to normalize and to not try to put tension points to the side. No one's going to ignore Taiwan. No one's going to ignore differences over the South China Sea or human rights or state surveillance. No one's ignoring those issues, but rather, as National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said last week, the goal here is cohabitation. And so this is about beginning the process of going back to normal. In terms of a productive, constructive, but still competitive dynamic between the U.S. and China.
Right. Now, coming to you, Susan, in New York, tell us a little bit about President Biden's strategy in this highly anticipated summit, or meeting rather, with Xi Jinping. Will he address China's territorial aggression towards Taiwan and Hong Kong?
The Biden administration has been very clear that it does want to set the agenda for these talks, and the United States has been also very clear that it is going to continue its policy of strategic ambiguity when it comes to dealing with Taiwan, despite the fact that President Biden himself made some headlines in a recent town hall meeting when he somewhat flip-flopped when asked about how he would deal with Taiwan and whether or not, if Taiwan was in some sort of danger, it would go to the aid of Taiwan. and that policy of strategic ambiguity was put into question. I think that's going to be sort of cemented. But I think another issue that's going to be very interesting, and it's a concern for Xi, is President Biden is expected to host one of two summits of democracies in December. And one of the big questions is whether the Taiwanese president will be invited to take part or not. And that's one of the key issues that I think is sort of going to be on, the elephant in the room and on Xi's mind as well. But I think President Biden goes into this meeting with a very strong stance, considering the alliances that he's formed in the Indo-Pacific, and he's going to raise his concerns about the recent missile tests on the part of China. I think that he wants to make very clear that while he is for competition, if at any point there is some sort of conflict, he does have the support of international and regional actors, and in no way or form it would back down from defending international rule and law. So I think it's moving forward from a position of strength, although, as we've always mentioned, it's really, we're not expecting some sort of full-on outcome and a bilateral statement from the two sides either.
Right.
Yeah.
Susan, stay with us. I want to take the next question from James. James, throw some light on what will be President Biden's strategy when it comes to handling his Chinese counterpart. The two huge sticking points, of course, remain the pandemic and its origins, as well as China's record on human rights violation. How is President Biden expected to tackle these?
Sure. I think Susan actually outlined it pretty well a moment ago. In this instance, the administration, so this meeting is coming 10 months into this administration. They have not rushed to meet to a meeting at the summit level between President Biden and President Xi. A lot of groundwork has been laid both in senior level meetings between the economic and security teams of the two governments, as well as a lot of the alliance and partnership diplomacy that's been engaged in the last couple months. And I'd particularly point to two events. One is the fact that not just one meeting, the Quad, but an in-person meeting of the Quad occurred in Washington several weeks ago, and also the very important AUKUS deal, the Australia, UK, US security technology agreement, and really a long-term positioning strategy in the Indo-Pacific that's being pursued by this administration that is in large part of continuity with what past administrations have been pursuing in this region since 2005 and since the US-India nuclear agreement. I believe that this administration has been positioning for a constructive initial high-level contact, as they say, virtual but face-to-face, for the first time for these last 10 months since they came into office. And the other thing I note that's important is that this administration, the Biden administration, has been really engaged in shoestrap diplomacy. They've been pounding the pavement all over the world, including in recent days in Glasgow at the COP26, in a way that the previous administration, the Trump administration, very much had not been. And this comes at a time when President Xi himself has essentially decided to abdicate his foreign policy role. President Xi hasn't left the country in 2021. He's made that choice as he's engaged in internal politics ahead of his unprecedented effort to seek a third 5-year term next year, and in part because of COVID-19 and the continuing global pandemic. So this is a way in which the U.S. has been present globally in a way that at the leadership level, President Xi is not.
Right. James, my final question for you very quickly. The U.S. has also expressed concerns about China's expanding nuclear arsenal. Tell us more about this.
That's certainly true. As Susan mentioned a moment ago, there have been a series of missile tests that have alarmed Western officials. And in particular, there have been a number of open source revelations about potential, we say potential because they're not confirmed, expansions of China's strategic and nuclear weapons portfolio, potentially to as many as 1,000 warheads. Now, this comes after years in which, of course, China had a strategic weapons capability, but which it made no effort to match what is still an outsized, in my opinion, U.S. and Russian portfolio of weapons. And a Chinese kind of race to invest in this space, while isn't necessarily surprising, given the nature of arms competition and the nature of security competition in the Indo-Pacific and globally in China's own ambition, is unfortunate because it takes us further and further away from a reduction of raw nuclear weapons, which has been a goal of past U.S. administrations and is a goal of this one. And it has been a stated desire of Beijing for many years.
Right. James, thank you so much for all your inputs and thank you for joining us on WION at this hour. Now, staying with this story, U.S. President Joe Biden will hold a virtual meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping, and we at WION will be tracking this highly anticipated meeting. This will be their first ever virtual interaction since U.S. President Joe Biden assumed office. A few minutes back, we touched upon the different issues that are likely to dominate these talks between the two leaders as the two countries race to become the world's top superpowers. Their leaders are facing contrasting political scenarios back home. U.S. President Joe Biden has been facing multiple crises. Biden's approval ratings have witnessed a downward trend in the past 2 months. It has hit the lowest point since he took office. According to an ABC survey, only 41% of voters approved of U.S. President Joe Biden. 39% approve of Biden's handling of the economy. In October, the United States witnessed inflation surging to a 3-decade high. Apart from this, Biden's low ratings have also been dominated by the supply chain crisis. Now, that is threatening the availability of food and other essential commodities. While Biden reels under an all-time low rating, his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping is all set for a third term in office. The 4-day plenary of the Chinese Communist Party established him as the uncontested leader. Xi's resolution was the only third such resolution to be adopted in CCP's 100-year history. And with this, the Chinese president has secured his position as China's most powerful leader since Mao Zedong. In the past, Biden has made it clear that he sees China as the U.S.'s greatest national security and economic competitor. The domestic circumstances that the two leaders face could possibly change the position that the United States and China take on contentious geopolitical issues. We still have our correspondent Susan Teherani live with us from New York for more on the story. Susan, thanks for staying on. My final question for you, how will the U.S. address crucial matters of trade and competition with China, especially with senior U.S. officials now saying that Biden is expected to urge Xi to play by the rules?
You know, it's interesting because despite the fact that the president is facing numerous domestic issues and really a free fall and a downfall in poll numbers when it comes to his domestic agenda, it's no coincidence that he's signing an infrastructure bill that, for whatever it was, gained some sort of bipartisan support just hours before this meeting with Xi, sort of signaling to Xi that democracies do work at the end of the day, and that's a signal that his form of governance and his path forward is sort of playing by the rule in the framework of liberal democracies. A lot of his domestic agenda is reliant on China, the supply chain issue on the one hand, and then you also have a lot of issues related to what's happening with trade and commerce right now, and the tariffs would probably also play a very important bargaining chip when it comes to asking China to play by the rules. If Xi is expecting for those tariffs to be lifted, then he should think again, because President Biden has made very clear that tariffs imposed on China during the Trump administration will not be lifted, at least not until China, quote unquote, does play by the rules. So we are going to expect President Biden to really press China on that issue and perhaps move forward in sort of easing some of his economic problems here at home by forcing China to play more fairly on the international front economically and not be so rogue.
Right. Susan Teherani, thank you so much for joining us from New York at this hour. WION World is One is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.